And so that really leads into the question almost though, like how far away are the stars? When we consider our perception of now as being manifested from a fifth dimensional vortex, how far away are we really from the stars? We look up, they look really far away. We look at the ground, it looks really close. Like, what is the actual distance when it comes to the dimension of density?
Right. Well, that's a great point. I've often told people, look, let's just do a quick hypothetical exercise just for a quick second here. And let's just say that all of a sudden you pop into existence, Alexei. Just there's nothing, and all of a sudden, in order for matter to exist, you must have a space for matter to exist, reside in, and so all of a sudden you would now exist. You look around, there's nothing around you. So you have no idea in relationship to anything, how big you are, how small you are, even if you're moving or not, because there's nothing to relate to. Now all of a sudden Chris pops into existence, and now there's you and Chris in the universe. That's all that exists. So you look at each other and you say, okay, well, I don't know how far you are away. You seem here, but really I could be really huge and you could be light years away, or we could be really, really small right next to each other.
I like
There's still no way to know, right?
That's cool.
Yeah, so then you get a bunch of other points, and then you start looking at each other and say, okay, well, there's something to relate to. Okay, you're over there, I'm over here, you're actually moving away from me, so there's a sense of motion and speed to some degree, but it's relative, because at the end of the day, all the matter in the universe, you can still look up and say, wow, the universe is really big and atoms are really small. But in reality, that's just in perspective to us. That's just, we don't know how big or how small the universe really is.
So is the Earth flat, right?
To a superverse.
No, I'm joking when I say that. No, so like, is the Earth flat, right? Like that used to be our perspective. From Earth, we look up, the sun goes around the Earth. The sun goes around Earth from Earth. That's a common, like if I were a human on Earth, I look at the sun goes around it. That's our perspective.
That's right. We felt that way for a long, long time, and it wasn't until we stepped outside of Earth to realize that's not the way it works. And
exactly. And so now when we look at the edge of the universe, hey, universe expands from every point in space and time. Universe must be expanding. Is that really the case?
Right.
Or let's break it down. Or let's break it down to the most primitive experience. We have a consciousness and we have a field of energy. That is the most primitive you can be. Consciousness, field of energy. And what we see from our days is that things are orbiting. We orbit the center of the Earth. Earth orbits the center of the galaxy. At that point, we think the universe is expanding. Well, hey, there's time dilations and Lorentz contractions associated in motion. And when we're talking about the orbit around the center of the galaxy, we're already going, 30,000? I don't know the actual number off the top of my head, but we're already going
24,000 miles an hour. Our rotational speed at the equator is about roughly 24,000 miles an hour, and then of course you have the orbital speed around the sun, which is considerably greater. But yeah, I've got you.
And then you get the orbit around the galaxy, right? And then so how fast is our galaxy orbiting, right? No. That's what our perception's getting stretched and crunched. So what I like to say is that literally, our perceptions are being magnified into existence based off of our accelerated frame of motion.
So 2 questions for you, gentlemen. First and foremost, let's talk about gravity. Okay, how small can something be before it no longer exerts any type of gravitational effect? So case in point, a black hole exerts a lot at the localized area, a lot of gravitational pull. The sun does too, but to a lesser degree, and Jupiter, which is supermassive, also has a big gravitational field, but lesser than the sun. The Earth has a gravitational field, lesser than Jupiter. We as human beings, if we were sitting out in space, you and I, Alexei, at 5 feet apart from each other, eventually we would come together because the gravity in me and the gravity in you are going to bring us together. And I suspect the same is even with, hypothetically, a cell. Take a cell here and a cell here in space, and eventually they'll touch. But there comes a point, perhaps, and I don't know, I mean, does it go all the way down to the proton? Does it go down to the electron, or does it go down to the muons and the bosons? I mean, or does it go smaller than that? At what point does something no longer either affected by or create its own gravitational field? Or is it the fact that it's matter it will always have, no matter how small it is?
I would lead towards there's always gravity, and it is the synchronization of light state, and as above is as below. And from our perception, I would say maybe the Planck size would be the smallest from our perception. But if you were
there's mass, there's gravity, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, from our reality, right?
I have a question.
But those are all. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it's accepted today, contemporary physics, right, that quantum mechanics deals with things on that level because they have a different relationship with things on our scale, right? That's why do we have quantum mechanics if things respond, the same way at that level as they do at our scale?
Well, it's hard to say that they're not responding at the same level. If you were to say, zoom into and you now become a Planck-sized consciousness, how do we know that the gravity and everything isn't really the same?
Or could it be that we are the closest to that nth degree than we think we are? Right? Maybe there is the smallest thing, and we're closer than we think we are to that point.
It was interesting. Eric Weinstein, he said gravity is exceptionally weak on us. So
it is.
in my view, it comes from it's like a higher dimensional kind of force.
I've heard that before, that gravity is leaching somewhere else, and that's why because it should be much, much stronger when you compare it to the other fundamental forces, the electromagnetic force and the nuclear force and whatnot. Let me ask you guys this, since we're talking about matter, and this is not a trick question, because again, this is something that I ponder sometimes at night I shouldn't say this, but with a nice cigar and maybe a glass of scotch. By the way, I don't condone smoking, for the record, so... it's like I'm Cuban, right? I'm Latin, so I've got a couple vices, and smoking a cigar occasionally is one of them. Let me ask you this: when I ask what the question is, what is matter? What is mass? Right? People say, well, it's stuff. It's stuff, and so say, okay, well, I'm obviously made of, the Earth is made of matter, and rock, and I'm made of matter, right? And so we can go down further, and then we can say, well, a cell is made of matter. It's made of atoms, right? I'm made of cells, and my cells are made of atoms. Okay, well, what are those atoms made out of? Well, those atoms are made out of subatomic particles, right? And you can get into the quarks and all these other stuff, and the WIMPs and the bosons and whatnot. But at some point, you get down to a basic fundamental element that is non-divisible. And the question is, what is that made of? Because ultimately, we look at matter as something being solid because we live at this macro level, and I look at my phone and my pen and my glasses. But Alexei, I'd be really curious, and yours, Chris, and yours, Tony, what you guys think when you get down to the smallest where that matter can no longer be subdivided into anything else. It's either there or it's not. What is it? What is it?
Can I guess what Alexei is going to answer? Alexei, you got to think of what you're going to answer.
Go ahead.
There is no divisible point. It keeps going. It's I think, is that what you're going to say, Alexei?
That's where I would be headed towards, yeah. And it really just comes down to harmonization. We have a brain. We have a consciousness. It needs to harmonize with the field of energy that exists in order for us to have an experience within our realm to begin with. And so I think that when you look at just waves, nature, and you look at the types of waves that exist within human consciousness, meaning delta through fast gamma, you need to understand that each one is kind of harmonizing with a different frequency. Because, every frequency has a size, right? And when it comes to human conscious harmonics, they multiply by 2. And so every wave essentially needs to harmonize. And when it comes to us being able to perceive the manifested realm, you need to be in your alpha, beta, or slow gamma state of consciousness. I think once you get to fast gamma, you have out of body. And once you're in theta, you're dreaming. So our only conscious perception lies within alpha, beta, and slow gamma. I think fast gamma is already the next. You're already kind of removing yourself from our physical realm.
And so human
the size of the brain, right? It's the size of the brain that makes that.
Not necessarily the size of the brain. It's the frequencies that can exist within the brain. Because in order for something to create a frequency, it either needs to pendulate back and forth or it needs to rotate. And so when you think about light, right, and the speed of light and the acceleration of light, in order for something to have a frequency of 1 hertz, it needs to be accelerating towards center at light speed while orbiting. And so that's a specific distance, specific time. And then when you think about just natural doubling nature of reality, the next harmonic that comes into experience is theta. And so if you want to multiply that times, say it's accelerating towards center light speed when orbiting, that has a certain diameter. And so each one of those diameters fractal in to be 1/4 of the diameter of the wave that's bigger. And you can say that's the field of experience that you're harmonizing with.
So can I ask a question right quick before I forget? So are we saying basically that contemporary, science as we know it now is going to be totally reliant on this unified theory that we don't have? In other words, at some point, quantum mechanics and relativity will have to be that unified theory that comes into play before we really understand as far as what, so that we can apply science to things, a new scientific method.
That's the first question. What Lou just asked actually is the first question I ask in my 5th book called The Fifth Dimension. I say, what is matter and what is light? And then my answer to that is, aren't they the same energy being perceived in two different ways, all created by a single motion?
I think it's more, and that would be the interdimensional telescope. I guess the idea is that the brain is actually more of a receiver than it is as a producer, right? We think that you live, well, I guess I thought before that you are what's in your brain, right? If I just download my brain into a computer, then, that'll be me in the computer. But you look at when people lose parts of their brain, right? Weird things happen. If you look at disassociate identities, this is probably the biggest example for me. If you have someone with multiple identities, and one of those identities is blind, when that identity has executive control, then the person is effectively blind. And this has been true to be, it's a fact. So multiple identities, you can be blind, the same person can be blind.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
That is
I've also talked to